the official podcast of FCS Fans Nation, with your hosts Kylor Neal, Matthew Frazee, and Jamie Williams.
FCS Fans Nation. Oh, it is a hot summer and some hot moments in college football. Welcome to Pure Chaos. And I'm not talking about the semis. I'm not talking about pre-playoff selection. We're talking college football realignment. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the FCS Fans Nation podcast. Emergency status right now. We have called out the big guns. Sorry, Kylor, that's not you. The legend, Sam Herder of Hero Sports and BetMGM, coming on to the podcast live with us tonight. Thank you so much to all the viewers who are flowing in right now to listen and talk about the current chaos that is realignment at the college football level and how that is going to impact the FCS. So I don't want to spend too much time on us guys. I think we're all doing pretty well tonight. But I just want to start off with just Sam. What were your reactions today? You were on fire on Twitter, just bouncing off people's comments and news. What's like your gut reaction right now going into this chaos? It seems like round 2 from last year.
Yeah, I mean, right away it was, all right, here we go again. You know, your mind as someone that covers the FCS automatically goes to how quickly the dominoes can fall. And so you see two power names like USC, UCLA going to the Big Ten, you automatically think, all right, well, the Pac-12, what are they going to do? Are they going to add teams from the Mountain West? If they do that, Mountain West, who are they going to add? Do they go to the FCS? But then you're kind of like, that's your instant reaction. But then after that, you kind of go, well, you know, maybe there is a scenario where the FCS isn't impacted at all by this, or it could be impacted severely by this. And I'm sure we'll go through all those scenarios and hypotheticals. But right away, it was, holy crap, here we go again. Let's see where the dominoes fall from here.
Yeah, and when those dominoes get going, it all started today with the big news. I'm sure I'm not shocking anybody when I say this, but just was voted on probably about 30 minutes ago to be official that USC and UCLA, they are heading off to the Big Ten, going to be official in 2024. They will be flying across the country to compete in one of the most revenue-based conferences that exists. I have seen plenty of informational tweets about how their yearly annual revenue is going to triple. So you're looking up into annual contracts worth $1 billion, $100 million a school, just insane money. And we're going to go into that a little bit deeper. Kylor, tell me what you thought about that initial reaction, and then let's start talking a little bit about what the fallout's going to be.
Gut wrenching. Growing up on the West Coast, I was a Pac-12 guy or Pac-10 guy through and through. And, it makes sense with kind of the current climate of today, and the Pac-12 has been pretty crappy the last 10 years. It's almost been an embarrassment of a conference. But I mean, when USC, the most figured name in the Pac-12 history, basically, they decided, hey, we're going to go to the Big Ten. It makes a lot of sense with these new super conferences, but ooh, it hurts. And now it seems like there's a lifeline. They're hanging on the edge. They're waiting for UW and Oregon, who kind of control the fate of the Pac-12 moving forward. So we'll see what happens, but man, it's a bummer. My childhood just died a little bit today.
Oh, I feel for you, Kylor, but we're clearly not done, correct? Does anyone on this podcast truly believe that the Big Ten or even the SEC or any of them are done at this point? We all know they're going to keep on moving, correct? Yeah, just a bunch of head nods. Listen, all the rumors right now, to catch you guys up, if you haven't been paying attention to the Twitter, refreshing like I have every couple minutes, is the SEC is now going to be reactive, and they are going to go after some more big names. The Big Ten is certainly not done. Those Pac-12 schools, whether you look at Oregon, whether you look at Stanford, you're looking at the Arizonas, they are reaching out right now to the Big Ten to see if they can be brought along. I'm sure the Big 12 is going to be reactionary in this, and the Pac-12 is in crisis mode. And there might not be anybody who knows anything more about FBS, FCS going up and going back down than Mr. Chris Hammond, who is joining us on the pod right now. Idaho Vandal, the number one fan that does exist. Chris, welcome back to the show. I know you're figuring out your mic right now. Just pop it back on whenever you're ready to speak. Looks like you're ready to go, my man. Chris, Is this giving you flashbacks to the possibilities of last year and Idaho back in the day? How are you feeling about the realignment?
Well, I caught a little bit of Kylor there. Pac-12 is kind of sacred. So a little sad to see that happen. As far as like Idaho, I mean, I don't think this is going to change anything for us. Yeah, it's funny because you look hindsight, the PCC, the original predecessor to the Pac-12, blew up because of USC. Now the Pac-12 is possibly going to blow up to USC or because of USC. As far as the Big Sky goes, I don't think Idaho is really much in play for a team that should be, getting looked at here. But I think, Matt, possibly North Dakota State, possibly Montana's. So there could be some FCS implications here. But, I mean, I think Sam nailed it. We thought the same thing with the SEC last year. And, I mean, yeah, we had a little bit of movement, but nothing earth-shattering per se.
Yeah, there's going to be way more dominoes and things falling as we move forward over the next couple of days. This thing is moving lightning quick, just like last year, and conferences are going to be reactionary. So, Sam, kind of wanted to pick your brain just a little bit. Number one, what do you think in terms of FCS impact? Do you think this is going to be more or less based off of the realignment stuff? We lost 3 teams to Jacksonville State, Sam Houston, and James Madison in the last round. What's your gut telling you right now in terms of how this could impact the FCS as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of tough to even try to guess. And obviously we're speculating on a lot of stuff and with a lot of hypotheticals. And I think I've tweeted a couple times, to a few different people that, this can go in many different directions. There is a chance that this round of realignments doesn't impact the FCS at all. It could just be the Power 5 eating each other up and to all of a sudden get to a Power 2, Power 3, mega conferences of 20 some teams. And like, it doesn't even trickle down into the G5 because for it to impact the FCS, it has to trickle down into the G5. And so there is that avenue where it might not impact the FCS at all. You can go the other way and say, holy crap, this might mean North Dakota State, South Dakota State, Montana states are going to be out of the FCS in a few years. And the way that would happen is obviously, the Pac-12 might have to add a couple of teams. They could look to the Power 5, again, eat other Power 5 teams, or they could look to the Mountain West. If the Mountain West loses teams, who do they go after? Maybe they go after G5 teams like SMU. And again, it doesn't impact the FCS. Or maybe the Mountain West, if they lose, a couple of teams to the Pac-12, then maybe the Mountain West has to go after a Montana State, or a North Dakota State, obviously to South Dakota State. And so there's a lot of different ways this can go, but I think right now it all depends on, what the Big Ten is going to do. Because if the Big Ten all of a sudden extends an invite to like 4 other Pac-12 teams, Oregon comes right to mind, those 4 teams aren't going to say no. They're going to say yes to that. And then what happens to the remaining 5 or 6 Pac-12 teams? Maybe they try to take some Big 12 teams, or maybe the Big 12 takes the rest of those teams. And then there's like 2 teams like Washington State left with nowhere to go. Then what happens? And in that scenario, like maybe nothing happens with the FCS. And so just a lot of different ways that this can go. But the dominoes, they'll start to fall, and we'll see where they kind of land from there.
We're going to do some hypotheticals here. So if you guys are watching live, get ready. Don't go anywhere because we literally have Excel sheets built for different scenarios, whether it's Power 2, Power 3, and we're going to be plucking and placing FCS teams if that would even become a possibility for them. Kylor, what do you guys think about this? Do you believe one way or the other this is ending in some sort of Power 2 major conference, or some sort of Power 3 that still survives? What is your gut telling you right now how this is going to play out?
Yeah, I think what's happening right now is we're going to probably look at 3 major powerful conferences, like the super conferences. You're going to have the Big Ten, the SEC. That's kind of already there. I don't know what they're going to call the Big Ten. Obviously it's not going to be 10 anymore, but it looks like the Pac-12, Big 12, there's going to be some type of merger there. Then you're probably going to have the SEC steal a couple ACC teams. Maybe the Big Ten steals 2 more ACC teams. And then, you're left with half of the ACC, half of the Pac-12, half of the Big 12, whoever doesn't really form that third major powerful conference or that super conference. What do you do with them? Almost this feels like the rumor that we've been talking about and hoping for the last 4 years since the page started, where maybe we're just going to see a complete break apart from the NCAA in general. These 3 super conferences now with all this money that's coming in, NLI deals, all of this stuff. Maybe they're just like, guess what? We want to pay our players without even endorsements. We don't want all these NCAA regulations. We make just as much money as the NFL. Let's step away from the NCAA, and then maybe that means the G5 and the top tier FCS conferences maybe form into a new Division I league. There's just so many moving parts. Who knows what's going to happen? But at least it seems to me like there is going to be 3 super conferences, and if there's 3 super conferences, I don't know how the rest of the G5 plays a part into even considering themselves capable of competing with them, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So is that bowl games are dead? Is that what happens here, or
maybe it's
how does
just
that work?
bowl games across the board with these super conferences? I mean,
I was like, while I was waiting for my computer update, the Big Ten had channel has a bunch of people coming on. They had Joel Klatt, Urban Meyer, Kirk Herbstreit, and they were talking about almost all of them echoing the same sentiment here of they think it's going to be 2 major conferences. It's going to be the Big Ten and the SEC, aka the NFC and the AFC. You're going to have about 20 teams, 25 teams in each. And then you basically are just playing, you'll have Fox who will have the Big Ten, and you'll have ESPN that has the SEC. And that's basically what it's going to be. And they were talking about one of the big linchpins for the college football playoff expansion was the Rose Bowl. Now, this is oddly became a way that the Rose Bowl can kind of stick around as you take the top teams from the Pac-12. Probably Washington and Oregon come in at some point into negotiations with this. That becomes your conference championship game now. Is instead of it being in Detroit or Indianapolis, I believe is where they play it currently. Now the Rose Bowl is a conference championship game. If those are even things anymore. But yeah, it was funny today because they had Coach Eck on down here in Boise radio. So obviously Boise State people, because him being from Wisconsin Badger, they're asking him about it. And the host down here brought up a good point that this is kind of like a great reset of college football. If you look at where we were when we went away from the 1AA, 1A situation, you're almost seeing the exact same teams kind of roll into this package. Well, we might see all the Power 5 type teams, or at least the top 50 or so programs, become their own entity, which the college football playoff is a separate entity of the NCAA already, become their own unionized body, governing body. That'll leave the NCAA basically running what Kylor said, a group of 5 and FCS mashup. There'll probably be some realignment in that, where some teams maybe have to go back down to D2, do the new stipulations that more powerful schools like a North Dakota State or a power or a group of 5 team that doesn't make it I guess UCF is going, like a Boise State or something. They'll be like, well, we want these stipulations because we're going to be the leaders of the pack per se. So a big grand reshuffling of college football because the NCAA didn't do a good enough job of governing it to begin with. Things have gotten out of hand now. They just couldn't handle NIL, which is kind of the linchpin to this whole argument, which has led to what we're dealing with now. So I could see where the NCAA still rules the group of 5 and the FCS with some restructuring. And then the top 50 or 60 programs completely break away under the college football playoff. And they'll have to figure out what that means for other sports. But I think we're going closer to that. And that's, echoing what Herbstreit said, he was kind of the gospel in terms of college football a lot of the time.
Yeah, I think it does seem like we are taking a giant step toward that Power 5 splits where even 3 weeks ago, because we've been talking about the Power 5 split and the G5 FCS merger for basically a decade now. And when you ask industry experts like Matt Brown of Extra Points about that, he's always said, whether he told me on my podcast or he's tweeted it or wrote it in his great newsletter, he's always said, the whole Power 5 split thing, that's always kind of been radio and Twitter fodder and message board stuff. And he said he was hearing more about an FBS split as a whole, where the FBS as a whole, G5 and Power 5 split off from the NCAA, and then the college football playoff basically runs things, from a financial perspective with the playoff. They run things from the bowl, stuff as well. So it's an entire group. It's an entire FBS split off from the NCAA. This now seems like this is the Power 5 kind of splitting off, from everything. And if you're the group of 5. The group of 5 is going to try to attach themselves to the Power 5 as long as possible. If the Power 5 splits off and does its own thing and says, yeah, G5, you can come with us, the G5 is going to go with them because they're going to get a piece of that college football revenue pot. So the G5 is always going to try to be alongside the Power 5. But if the Power 5 says, look, we have these 3 super conferences, we're going to do our own thing, that's when you have possibly 3 total Division I subdivisions, but 2 under, the the view of the NCAA. One would be the G5 FCS merger. The other would be like a Division I AAA or whatever you want to call it. It seems like 3 weeks ago that was kind of like, who knows if that's ever going to happen. But now it's like, okay, it seems like we're kind of making our way toward that a little quicker than we thought it was going to happen.
Sam, I'm glad you said that. I have a great question for you. Okay, so if we have 60 teams at the FBS level that are just like the powers, right? Doesn't matter if it's 2 or 3 conferences, doesn't matter. There's 60 of them. And then all these other current FBS teams kind of get left behind. If they are still part of the pool of money from the playoff and they're still kind of like bowl games, or if they're not allowed in and they form their own playoff and make way less money, which one is more attractive to the teams that are currently in the FCS that are like the top 10 ready for FBS moves? Your NDSU, your Montana State, maybe throw in Kennesaw, Tarleton State's talked about it, SFA, your SDSU if they can make it financially. Like those 10 right there. Would they rather be part of the bowl games with a crap ton of money, or would they rather make way less money and be back into a playoff where they can win a championship? What do you think would be more attractive in that scenario?
I think for most of those programs, they would say that they would rather play in that tier where there is a playoff instead of bowl games. I've heard a lot of Montana State fans and South Dakota State fans say that. I heard North Dakota State fans say that up until about 2018. And now I think whatever way, even if that means playing in random bowl games, I think NDSU fans would take that now over a playoff or over the FCS playoffs right now. But you mentioned it, Matt, that if you're the G5, I think you're kind of sitting nervous right now. If you're in the FCS, like, I don't know if like you're probably some anxiety if you're an FCS program, but at the same time, there's always going to be room for these FCS programs, right? The ones that don't want to spend tens and tens of millions of dollars, on facilities and NIL and cost of attendance and facilities and all that stuff. There's always going to be a spot in Division I football for FCS teams. The G5, I think, is the teams that should be nervous because, like I said, if the Power 5 just decides to split off and start its own thing, yeah, the G5 can start its own playoff and merge with the FCS, start its own playoff. How much revenue is that going to generate? If you're, I don't have budgets in front of me, but if you're spending $45 million in the MAC, like, is that sustainable if all of a sudden you're not getting that college football revenue pots and you're not getting the bowl game payouts? And so I think, like, yeah, I'm a little nervous about the future of the FCS and like the amount of good teams and good fan bases that are part of it. But I also think G5s might be a little nervous too, saying like, we might be out on a lot of revenue if the P5 just says, yeah, we're going to do our own thing now in 2026 or whenever, contracts are up.
No, 100% what you just said. Like, I'm not just saying this as somebody who is very, Boise State, whatever, but I do live in the backyard. This today was probably the first time I've heard like media personalities and fans like a little bit shook of like, they know the Pac-12 is not really an option. This probably means the Big 12 is also losing that status. And they're kind of sitting there as like one of those programs that has put a lot of money and investment to try to get there. And that door is closing probably fast. They probably thought they had another 10, 20 years to eventually climb their way into that. And they've made huge investments into a lot of their sports and their facilities. And that door seems like it could be closed by 2024, 2025. And we'll have an idea of who the 50, 60 teams are. And then they're sitting there. Today was the first time I've heard them ever go, but the FCS has a 2014 playoff that sounds pretty great. And it was like a shift of narratives almost today where like almost like we might be left out on this. We've got to start weighing other options, which I just haven't experienced in my years living here. So I think even like as Boise State being one of those top G5 programs, you could hear a little bit of rattle in them. Like, I don't think we're going to be able to get where we need to be before this door closes, and that split is final.
And one thing on top of that too is I can't remember who told me this and if it was on the record or off the record, but they basically said that G5 teams are facing a lot of pressure right now about the money they're spending. Like if you're Alabama, USC, you can spend the amount of money you're spending. You can put up crazy facilities because you're bringing in that revenue. But G5 is trying to keep up too, and they're spending money, but they're not necessarily bringing that revenue back in, right? It's a lot of student fees and stuff like that. And so again, if the Power 5 splits off, what does the G5 do? Those budgets are probably going to have to lessen a little bit. I don't think the G5 would come down to the FCS. It'd be more like we talked about a merger. But yeah, I mean, that's interesting about Boise State and how like their media is kind of like, oh, like this could be not where we thought it was going to be going.
Yeah, that is because I've never even thought of it that way. But yeah, you're looking at like the top tier G5 teams like App State, Marshall, Boise, San Diego State, all of these that didn't really get the realignment invites already. And maybe there's still going to be room to grow in the Big 12 or something like that. But from what it seems like, yeah, that door is shutting extremely fast. Where the top tier of the FCS, they're looking at this like opportunity. They're like, hell yeah, all of this stuff's good. It's opportunity. A lot of us can move up. But yeah, that top tier of the G5 where they don't really know where they're going to go, this is like devastating, and it could reduce their budgets drastically. It may create a more, even playing field across the board. It's going to be crazy. And I know we're going to talk about this soon about all the hypotheticals and where we think stuff's going to go, but holy shit.
Even like,
this day
UCF,
was crazy.
UCF put in all this money and finally got that door open to the Big 12, but the Big 12 might not be that safe boat anymore. Like,
yeah, they may
Texas Tech and Oklahoma State, like the last kind of strongholds there. The SEC could pick off, or the Big 10, and then you're sitting there in your UCF and you're like, we put in all this investment, we got there, and with 2 years, our hopes and dreams were gone, and now we're stuck with this bill with none of the money that we thought we'd have to pay it back because TV deals are going away. And Kylor, I know you and I believe, and we'll probably get into this. This is probably the last round of realignment where TV deals even matter.
Yeah,
so
boomers die, TV's
it's big.
gone.
Yeah, it's all going to go to like what the MLS did and partner with like Apple TV or something and self-produce it. But
the great thing is if you're Baylor and Tech, let's just throw them out there right now because they're like really the promising figures where they can go a multitude of ways, right? They're going to get an invite somewhere. If it's through the Big 12 and the Big 12 absorbs the Pac-12, or if the SEC wants some of them to focus on Texas A&M, Texas, maybe they grab Baylor, maybe they grab Texas Tech. So if you're those two last stronghold Texas teams that are definitely P5 caliber, you got so many bargaining chips. How do you want to swing this? Are you going to totally make it so there's a collapse of the Big 12? Because if you leave, Big 12 is 100% gone. Are you going to join one of these other conferences? Because if you go to the Pac-12, Pac-12 is probably still around. But, I mean, those two Texas schools have so much bargaining chips right now, and it's going to be interesting to see who's going to entice them because they have all the power, right? It's like Washington and UW. They have tons of power right now. And then those two Texas schools. Those four teams control so much power right now, and who wants them, who wants to pay more, what's going to happen with them. It's exciting, but as a Pac-12 fan, like I said in the beginning, it's so gut-wrenching.
Wazoo to the Big Sky, let's go.
Yeah, Wazoo to play Central Washington yearly. I mean, same level of talent, same caliber of program, might as well.
Sam Herder on Hero Sports this year, type in his FCS top 25. And 2 years from now, he's like, I think Washington State coming in number 3 for the year. Chaos is just broken out. Oh, my goodness.
Kansas gets the first 20. No.
Montana may not have the best stadium in the Big Sky again. So let's go.
Yeah, there you go. So in terms of FBS teams jumping down, that's not a hypothetical we'll jump into because very rarely does it happen. Like nobody in this podcast has ever experienced that or anything. So besides that, let's talk a little bit about teams that might be going up. So we're going to get into some hypotheticals, guys. I swear we're coming up on it. You're going to see Excel sheets and we're going to place teams. It'll be a lot of fun. But let's just start with the baseline information in terms of who is that even a possibility for? Sam, you're the guest, so I'm going to always start these questions with you if that works. Who's worthy of a call up? And then who wants it? If you had to say who would want that call up combined with these people are in a good position, this team is in a good position, the program is. Who do you think from the FCS?
Yeah, well, if you would have asked me 24 hours ago who the next 3 most likely move ups are going to be from the FCS to the FBS, it would be Tarleton State, Eastern Kentucky, then maybe like maybe like a McNeese or like a Central Arkansas, teams like that, just because we know at some point Conference USA will probably want to expand. And we know Tarleton and Eastern Kentucky, I think just a couple of months ago, actually presented to Conference USA about why they can make that jump. And so I would have said those are the most likely, but now, we could be looking at the Mountain West having to add. And I guess, Kylor, you could probably chime in here too, because how this would work basically for, Mountain West to grab some FCS teams is the Pac-12 would first off have to survive, right? They can't get picked off by the Big 10 and the Big 12. And they would have to add some teams, whether they would try to add teams from the Big 12. If that didn't happen, they would probably look to some G5 teams from the Mountain West. And the Pac-12 has a rule or bylaw, whatever you want to call it, that you have to be a tier 1 research institution to be a part, of the Pac-12. And Boise State is not that. And so, right now under those bylaws, unless they change, like Boise State couldn't go to the Pac-12. And Kylor, I think you have the list of Mountain West teams that are tier 1.
I just kind of wrote at least the Mountain West teams that I think are most likely to make that transition. Of course, when I'm reading off some of these Mountain West teams, you're like, no way are they Pac-12 caliber. But it's basically the stipulations the Pac-12 has in place. Now, if they need to survive, maybe they change these stipulations, right? But as of right now, the hypotheticals we're playing, it's kind of, they're not changing their criteria because they are an academic first conference.
And Utah was not really Pac-12 caliber when they got the invite. They were flirting with it. But when you get there and you get that money,
you make
that's
it
how
happen.
you become that caliber.
Yeah, so right now, the Mountain West teams that are currently able to, just by meeting their criteria right now, Colorado State, and also I think they're the best bet from the Mountain West because they already have amazing facilities. That new football facility is fantastic. They already have a regional rival in Colorado there. But then you got Utah State. Again, I think that's more likely than a Boise because they have the regional rival. They're already a tier 1 institution for research. Then you actually have surprising ones like UNLV, right? Most people are like, the Eastern Washington beat them. They're horrible. Okay, but once you get an invite to a Pac-12 conference, you're going to see an uptick in recruiting. The Vegas metropolitan area is expanding. UNLV makes a lot of sense. Yeah, they use a giant stadium, but you can have Nevada, New Mexico. I know UTEP's kind of in Conference USA or something like that, but I mean, those ones make sense too if you're not going to be able to poach some of the Big 12. But that makes the Pac-12 in survival mode, right? Their goal is not to grab Mountain West teams. Their goal is to still be some type of power conference. So I think that's where I said it all really depends on this Oregon UW rumor that's kind of going around too. Because if they're staying, my guess is all those Mountain West teams outside of Colorado State don't make a lot of sense. And then they're going to really try and go after the Texas schools. But if Oregon and UW leave, my guess is, they're going to have to try and form, if they want to survive, be the new Mountain West. And either they're going to get rid of their criteria for academics, or those are the schools that are viable right now that they can maybe poach. So it's going to be interesting to see what the Pac-12 does with their current restrictions and criterias of being that tier 1 research institution. But yeah, Boise's not there. SDSU, which everyone knows, those are the two teams that everyone talks about. Those are the teams that are most ready to go to the Pac-12. Well, there's a reason why Gonzaga also has an invite. They're not a tier 1 research institution. They also don't play football. Those two other teams are not tier 1 institutions for research. I believe they're tier 2. So they can make it happen, but they would need to get some type of millionaire, billionaire to go, guess what? We want to solve how to cure cancer and, get into that tier 1 facility. So they're going to have to ask for a lot of money to try and get up to that next level. And if the Pac-12 invites them, they will figure out a way to make it happen, like Chris just said with Utah. But I don't think they're looking at those two teams right yet when there's other viable options that meet all their criterias right now.
When you say SDSU, do you mean the team, when I Google SDSU football,
Brookings,
the Aztecs pop up, or the one where I have to add the rabbit word in the middle of that just to make anything appear? Like, what?
The one you have to, the one you have to say NDSU's daddy. Once you put that on the Google, the marker trophy.
They've beat us twice in the last 2 times.
I know, daddy. They're daddy.
Sam, you were going to say something before I threw a bad joke in.
Because we could break this down into hypotheticals. One I talked about where the Pac-12 just gets rated. Another one is where maybe because I saw something out there that the Big Ten is having talks with some other Pac-12 teams, but the big honcho right now they're going after is Notre Dame. So they might be interested in Oregon, but they say, hey, wait a few years. And so there is a scenario where no more Pac-12, Pac-10, whatever teams leave, and it's just those 10 teams. And if that's the case, the Pac-12 can do two things. They could stand pat. They could just say, we're good with these 10 teams. We're not going to add any teams because while UNLV and Colorado State fit in, because of their, research, tier 1 research or whatever, we're still talking about Stanford here. We're still talking about UW. Like Cal. They're going to be snobby and Cal, and look down their nose and be like, well, we don't want to add UNLV. They're not good at football. It's Las Vegas. Like, we're good with our 10. And so there is a scenario where the Pac-12 stays pat and doesn't add any teams at all. Yep. And so Mountain West teams also stay put. But that's not really fun for podcast talk, right? So let's say the Mountain West does lose 2 teams to the Pac-12. What would the Mountain West do then if they lost a couple teams to the Pac-12? One scenario again would be they just go to Texas G5 schools. They grab maybe a UTEP and SMU, and it doesn't reach the FCS at all. Again, that's not too fun for this podcast. And so let's say they do go after some FCS teams. Montana State are hand in hand and everything. Montana State can't go to the Mountain West if Montana doesn't get the invites. That's something with like the state board or whatever. They have to go together. So those are two options right there. Regionally, it makes a lot more sense than in North Dakota State. At the same time, I think North Dakota State moves the needle a little bit more just from a national, reputation standpoint. And so I think you immediately look at Montana State, North Dakota State, and maybe South Dakota State, but I don't know if South Dakota State's too interested in that move. And then we can go down a whole different rabbit hole of if North Dakota State does get an all sports invite to the Mountain West, they would probably say yes, but there is a chance that they couldn't make that money work because of the travel budget, but that's a whole different other wormhole. So there is a scenario that the FCS does lose some big time programs to the Mountain West, but a lot of things a lot of dominoes have to fall before that happens.
Yeah, unless it's changed. What's crazy about like the all sports thing is that I caught 3 different sources from CBS all the way to ESPN, and they were talking about how this move by USC and UCLA does not involve all sports at this moment. Like this is just like this is football. Like this is football moving. I'm sure that's bound to change. And maybe it's changed in the last 3 hours from when I listened to that at like 11 a.m. or whenever it was. But it wouldn't shock me if football just becomes this completely separate entity, but we'll have to see. One more outlier, guys, I want to throw in there, maybe not an outlier before we kick into these hypothetical scenarios is I think we've mostly mentioned all the teams that could get invites or bounce up there. What about UC Davis? And I'll start with you, Kylor. You kind of keep pounding the table for them a little bit. If you guys kind of want a round table, and what are the odds that they could end up in maybe like the Mountain West as an option for them?
I mean,
and
I honestly think
why UC Davis? I guess.
I honestly think UC Davis has a better chance to go to the Mountain West than even NDSU right now. Yes, they don't have the facility right now, but guess what? If the California, LA market's already going to the Midwest or something like that, why wouldn't you want another California school in there to compete with a Fresno State, to compete with a San Jose State? UC Davis, in terms of institutions on the West Coast, they're like a top 5 institution. Why wouldn't you want a school that's actually going to elevate the academics? Then also they got 40,000 students. They got a $2 billion endowment. That's more than all of the Mountain West. The nice thing is they already have a really nice facility, and they've already got approved to build the funds and extend their facility to 30,000 kids. This is a program where a lot of FCS programs, money is kind of a hindering factor, right? UC Davis doesn't have that. They already have one of the top athletic budgets. Actually, all of the California schools do. You look at Sacramento State, they're double NDSU's almost. UC Davis, they already have all the funds. They can do whatever they want. It's just, is the fan base going to turn out? And I'm sure in California in general, they don't care about FCS. They have so many FBS institutions. Once you say we're going FBS, the fan base is going to instantly increase, especially under Dan Hawkins. I believe he just signed a pretty big extension. So I think just geography-wise, money-wise, academic-wise, school-wise, UC Davis they can move up whenever they want. They don't need an invite. They're one of the rare few teams who can actually jump up like Liberty and be independent and be totally fine. If you're looking at the Mountain West, sure. NDSU, they got a sexy name. They're going to elevate the talent level. But if you're looking at a school that has maybe more longevity on what you can accomplish, the sky's the limit for UC Davis. They can do whatever they want. Same with almost Cal Poly. Same with, I don't want to say Sac State as well, but I mean, that's a massive school. If they start to get more state funding, they can do whatever they want to. But UC Davis is one of those, a lot of money, very rich. They already got the stadium planned, approved, funded. Whenever they need to build that 30K stadium, they have it. How many FCS teams can say that they already have an approved 30,000K stadium that they can build at the drop of a hat, and that is in a good market? So, I mean, yeah, UC Davis is a clear-cut favorite to me if they don't want to go to the Montana schools and bring in 2 of them, right? Because it is nice when you bring rivals together. But if you're looking for maybe one filler, because like Sam said, maybe it doesn't really affect the FCS much, and maybe they go after a few Conference USA teams instead. Well, if they go after a few Conference USA teams and they don't want to add 2, UC Davis makes a lot of sense. And then the Conference USA is going to have openings, and maybe your North Dakota State makes sense to go into Conference USA. I mean, who knows? But yeah, UC Davis is ready whenever they want. They're the ones who are waiting to press enter on the keyboard to say, yeah, we're moving up.
Absolute insanity what money can do. To clarify my comments in the past, things are now way more clear. The schools UCLA and USC are moving all sports to the Big Ten except for beach volleyball, men's volleyball, and men and women's water polo. So sorry to those 4 sports. Everything else
You're telling
Big
me
Ten.
You're telling me the Big Ten doesn't have beach volleyball?
Yeah, crazy.
This that Midwest cornfield beach
Lake
volleyball
Superior.
looks-
You could go right off, you could go right off the Great Lakes.
Wind won't
January is a
impact
great
that at
time.
all.
Yeah, wind doesn't impact football. You just play indoors. That's
Yeah,
where real
exactly.
teams play. That's what
Yeah,
they
I'll say to Kylor's point, I got the opportunity to actually go down to the Sacramento area this spring. Took time and went and toured UC Davis and Sacramento State. Until you go there, because I've heard the news, I've seen the studies and seen the stadium expansion stuff. But until you're on that campus, I mean, I don't want to crap on Sac State, but Sting is down. That school is not even close to what UC Davis is, and that's being a part of the UC system. That campus is beautiful. I literally said, I mean, I lived in Seattle. I've seen UW. Got to see Colorado, Oregon, all these USC, UCLA. UC Davis might be one of the nice, if not the nicest campus I've ever seen. I believe their endowment is like $1.8 billion, and they're like the 6th ranked public university in the entire country.
They got
So, like,
40,000 kids.
If you're talking like the schools that are going to be fighting this the most are going to be like San Jose State and Fresno State, because in that group of 5, if this stuff was to happen, they own Northern California. Man, if UC Davis gets a crack, they're in the Sacramento area. They're also closer to they're not closer to Oakland and San Francisco, but they're not much further than a San Jose is in terms of traffic time, just in how that region is set up. It becomes equally advantageous if you're a kid from the Bay Area to look at UC Davis over a San Jose State and definitely over a Fresno State. So those schools, and they don't have the money that UC Davis has. So UC Davis becomes an immediate threat to those 2 schools, which is why I would see them being a little bit meh on the Mountain West idea, because that greatly impacts their ability in San Jose State outside of one COVID year to actually win and compete in the Mountain West has been very bad. So I could see them being against it. And Fresno State really likes kind of being that G5 team for Northern California. That said, Dan Hawkins obviously has connections with Boise State. Dan Hawkins also has connections in the state of Colorado for if Colorado State isn't picked over. And UC Davis, I believe either it's their president or their athletic director has ties to the University of Colorado as well, which means they have ties within the Colorado state government, which, Colorado State being a public institution is also, a part of. So I think UC Davis also has the leverage and the political connections to get a move like that done that some of the other schools we talked about just don't have.
Chris, whoa. This has nothing to do with politics or money. This is all about the love of the game and the sport. Gentlemen, we're amazing discussion so far. We have our live stream hour we have available to us. So in the last 20 minutes here, let's play some hypothetical. This is the fun part if you've stuck with us so far. I don't know which one of these are going to be more fun, but you gentlemen are going to take care of this for me. I am not going to involve myself much besides doing some typing here. But I will start with, I think this will be the more fun hypothetical. Here I have, unless I've typed something wrong or messed something up, I have USC and UCLA moving to the Big Ten and a current SEC with Texas and Oklahoma. And Brent McMurphy, I believe, is the name. He's a pretty famous writer right there. I'm using his resource right here. He put out this tweet earlier 5 hours ago about how Arizona State, Colorado, and Utah may be moving. So I'm sure that's changed since now, but that's what I went with to establish a new Big 12, if you will. So that leaves the Pac-12 needing 4 teams to get back to 10 at a minimum. Of course, this is all hypothetical. So I'm kind of curious, where would the Pac-12 go to fill those 4 teams? And then what do those conferences do if you're going to poach 4, possibly 6 from elsewhere? So we'll do like we did when we do our playoff mock selection. Everyone will get a final pick. Sam Herder, you're the guest. Where do you think first the Pac-12 would look if they had to rebound in a situation like this?
Ooh, yeah, that's tough because I mean, in this scenario, that means like Oregon is still staying put, right? They're not going to the Big Ten.
Yeah, you have the 2 Washington schools, the 2 Oregon schools, Stanford and Cal. They're going to stay connected at this point. Again, complete hypothetical. This is going to give us some more FCS options. Sam, I won't put all the pressure on you. Gentlemen, if you see one you think is glaring, who do you think is going to hop into the Pac-12 here in this scenario?
I mean, I think the first teams they would reach out to would probably be the Big 12, try to get Power 5 teams on board there. But I don't know if any Big 12 teams would leave for the Pac-12, especially with like TV deals. I think TV deal wise, like the Big 12 would be like making a lot more money in TV deals, with this new look. And so I couldn't see like a Texas Tech, going to the Pac-12. So I think in this scenario, I think the Pac-12 would probably look toward a couple of teams from the Mountain West.
Awesome. What do you think, Chris? Who do you think would be jumping into that Pac-12 in this situation? Of course, we're going to try to get our ways down to that FCS option area.
Yeah, I mean, their first call should be Notre Dame, obviously. Wouldn't happen, so then you're moving on to your FCS options.
You don't think they'll gut the Mountain West first there?
Yeah, I thought we were going to go full FCS, but yeah.
Oh, yeah. Let's gut the G5 first and then go.
Gutting the G5, I mean, Colorado State and UNLV are like my 2 obvious choices, so I'll take UNLV. They are going to play their championship game in Vegas. They'll go Rebels, and they got a basketball program. The Pac-12 used to be a basketball conference.
Used to be. Kylor, you got a team that you see could pop in the Pac-12 if they needed 3 more.
I mean, I said this earlier. I just don't think this is even realistic. If Oregon and Washington stay, all those Big 12 teams like Arizona, they all go, and then we poach the Big 12. But for your hypotheticals, even though this will never happen, the Pac-12 will just go away. If you're doing UNLV, you're going to grab Colorado State. I think they're the most viable option.
Colorado State, UNLV, going to the Pac-12. Mr. Herder, you got another one here. Is this going to be all Mountain West? Do you think they'd look a little more south, or where do you think?
I think, yeah, like Kylor said, like if the Pac-12 lost those 4 teams to the Big 12, I think a lot of these teams from the Pac-12 would end up bolting to the Big 10. I don't think they would stick around because like Oregon and like Stanford, like they're not going to want to be remaining with and bringing in these jamokes. But just for the fun of it, let's go with this. So I think maybe somehow, because it'd be maybe a bit more regional, well, maybe not. I was going to say maybe BYU would maybe not end up going to the Big 12 and go to the Pac-12, but now that like Colorado and Utah are in the Big 12, that wouldn't make sense for BYU to do. So yeah, I don't know. This is tough, which is why I think Oregon would end up, like ditching, the Pac-12 in this scenario. So I don't know really what options they have. Like I said, I don't think they would take a team from the Big 12 or a Big 12 team would go there.
If we're looking at strictly this hypothetical that me and Sam both think is on drugs, Rice is actually one of the better solutions. They meet all the Pac-12 academics. They're one of the best schools in the nation. They have a facility. It's not nice, but it's big enough. They're in a nice TV market right in downtown Houston. I mean, if you're looking to make this unrealistic case realistic, Rice is actually one of the teams, even though they're horrible, that makes a lot of sense, and you can improve that program pretty fast with all of their advantages.
Snag SMU with
SMU and Rice, and that would make up for kind of the debacle.
But then you also get a private religious institution with SMU, which they don't take either. So I guess SMU wouldn't be going. But yeah,
maybe Rice in UTSA.
Yeah,
Rice and UTSA. Bring them in.
Be like Texas. We'll take a Texas market. The Big 12 ones don't want to come. We'll just make our own big.
But Texas in this one, I think we're all agreeing if this happens, Oregon and Washington are in the Big 10, and the Pac-12 is completely dead. They're gone. They're gone. They are a D2 conference.
To be fair, we thought the same thing about the Big 12 about a year ago. So
the Big 12, I still
think they rebounded.
It depends.
Not a great rebound.
Oregon, Washington.
They're alive.
Honestly, what I think is going to happen is the Big Ten is going to make more power moves. They're going to add, 4 teams. The Big Ten is going to add 4 more teams from the Pac-12, and then it's going to be Pac-12 versus Big 12. Who's going where? Either these 4 Pac-12 teams are going to go to the Big 12, or these Big 12 teams are going to go to the Pac-12. And whichever one loses that realignment battle is going to be in a tough spot. And the rest of their scraps will be picked up by maybe other P5s or those G5 teams like we talked about before that are now going to the Big 12. They're going to be left saying, well, we don't have a home anymore. So, I think it's going to be Big 12 versus Pac-12 at some point.
But this scenario is happening. So
this is
more fun because then this trickles down into the FCS.
And then what happens when we look like geniuses in 6 years?
Or Utah State gets put up there somehow, right?
No way.
You lose Utah. You want they're tier 1 research institution. They got nice facilities. They meet the Big Sky mold, or not the Big Sky, the Pac-12 mold over,
fit
a
the
Texas
Big Sky
team.
mold.
They fit the Big Sky mold very well. So we're going to replace them and bring Portland State to the Mountain West.
I swear we didn't set this up, guys, in any way. Like Sam and Kylor and Chris, they didn't even know that I was really doing these Excel sheets. And the best thing about this is, honestly, you guys have set up the perfect hard hypothetical. Like, you legitimately have just done that. So let's say the American, they could just say where they're at, but let's say they want 2 more teams and they're going to look to the FCS. Okay. Nobody else wants to go there, which I know is unrealistic, but let's just say that's the thing. The American, which is, as you can see, pretty stretched out all the way from North Texas, Florida area, ECU. They want 2 FCS squads. And let's say the Mountain West, as you can see on the Excel sheet, they're missing 2 as well.
You have FCS Wichita options, State in the American?
Do I have Wichita State in the American? Where do I?
Right,
Oh, yeah. Okay. Wikipedia is not always accurate, but okay, let's just say this is the hypothetical, okay?
We're an FCS podcast, guys.
Yeah. All 46 of our followers that are
shockers.
He was watching that Apple soccer TV show,
that's
the Wichita State football.
Yeah.
As Michael Scott says, Wikipedia is the best because anybody, anywhere can write anything. So you always know you're getting the best information.
Facts.
So, all right. So let's say the American wants to add 2, Mountain West wants to add 2, and you have these FCS options right there. Which teams do you think actually go up? And I think you're about to piss off a lot of Bison fans. What do you think there, guys?
To the American?
Yeah, to the American. What 2 teams would go to the American in this scenario? They have to be
the
FCS.
American wants to add is the thing. But if they were going to, I think Missouri State, honestly.
Missouri State. Oh, yeah.
Missouri State's been connected to the Sun Belt as far as a possible expansion. So if also the American says, screw it, we want to do a super G5 conference, they want 2 more teams, I think they would probably look to Missouri State.
Missouri State. I like that.
I think worst case scenario is even the American. They probably go after already a G5 team, which opens up another Sun Belt, which opens up another CSU.
Let me make one tweak here. UTEP, and yeah, we'll just do Florida International. I know the odds are low, but there you go.
I'm glad there was spell check.
Yep.
I want to misspell
Thank goodness.
Florida.
All right, CUSA. 2 spots open in CUSA now. 2 spots in the Mountain West. CUSA, more realistic. Which FCS teams get the call?
Tarleton is an easy go. They're already going to have the largest FCS facilities. 24,000 is what they've already got approved and are starting to build. So yeah, you're looking at SFA and Tarleton, and it makes up really that Texas footprint they want. Regional rivals with Sam Houston State. Yeah,
EKU possibly with Western Kentucky and a few of those others, or no? You think Tarleton?
Tarleton for sure, and then it could be either EKU or SFA. EKU really wants it. The only hiccup there could be Western Kentucky could throw a fit about Eastern Kentucky coming in, but I think EKU has a pretty good chance.
Yeah, Chris, Western Kentucky has a natural rival, so I kind of like that. I mean, I'm not familiar with the directional Kentucky schools' animosity towards one another, but I imagine Western Kentucky, the Hilltoppers, have long since been waiting for a true kind of rivalry to set in to keep their fan base engaged. Talk about instant, East versus West right there. That probably becomes one of the bigger games in the CUSA is, Middle Tennessee versus Liberty probably doesn't get most fans out of bed. But anytime you put Eastern State versus Western State, I could see that being big. I could see with the right convincing the Hilltoppers be like, yeah, let's bring the Colonels in. Why not?
So, Chris, I'll let you do the tiebreaker, man. Who do you want in there, SFA or you want EKU?
Why don't we have both since there's only 9 teams? They have a 9-game playoff season.
Because, same thing goes with Sam Houston. They probably want the Battle of Piney Wood back. I don't think a game against New Mexico State really gets their, GBs going. So I think, they'd be fighting for SFA to come join them.
All right, well, that makes it interesting. So if we're sitting in a world where SFA, EKU, they're gone, they're up out of here. What about
even McNeese sounds so good in that conference with Louisiana Tech. Man,
that could be tough. Maybe they go to 12. Yeah, we'll just throw them all in. And NDSU gets in there. All right, so before we get to
a G5 merger.
Yeah. Before we get to our next Excel sheet, which could be really tough for you guys. Mountain West, we need 2 teams. These looks like some pretty good options. NDSU, SDSU, Montana State, Idaho, and UC Davis. Clearly, they could go try to gut somebody else, but let's stick with the FCS here. They go FCS with 2 teams. Who's it going to be? Where's your gut kind of telling you right here, Mr. Sam Herder?
My gut is telling me Montana and Montana State.
Bringing in both the schools fills a void.
Because if it's not those 2, then it'd be North Dakota State and UC Davis. If the only option was 2. Because it can't be Montana State and UC Davis, or it can't be Montana and North Dakota State. Because, again, Montana and Montana State have to be tied together. I still don't think South Dakota State wants to be FBS unless there is that G5 FCS merger. I think South Dakota State always wants to be in that second tier of Division I college football. And so I right now my gut would say Montana State.
Kylor, Chris, we going to put them up there? What do you think? You think it's Davis and someone else?
Nope, I think that's perfect.
I think, you look, you still have the likes of like Nevada, former Big Sky member. There's relationships in history there that there's none of the other options provide. So I think that's just the easy plug-in. Boise State, Nevada, pull for former Big Sky teams. I see that as the most likely scenario, even though UC Davis would be the better ad. But like you said, you can't take UC Davis and Montana. So they're going to be like, all right, well, if we want Montana, we have to take Montana State. Sorry, UC Davis.
Well, that could be a fun hypothetical. Maybe we have some more realism here, ladies and gentlemen. This is our second scenario. As you can see, the SEC has added Texas and Oklahoma. Sorry about that. Yeah, Texas, Oklahoma, they're already in there. Clemson, Florida State, UNC, and Miami all jump to the SEC. The Big Ten nabs USC, UCLA, Oregon, Washington, Notre Dame, and Stanford. The Big 12 expanding with Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, Utah, Cal, Oregon State, and Washington State. The Pac-12 is dead in the water. The ACC becomes still probably the best one out of the rest of them, but nothing too crazy. Leaving one spot open in the Big 12. So here's where it becomes kind of chaotic and fun. Who would be that one team the Big 12 would want to bring in? And then would there be any shot for an FCS school? Let's go all the way down the line, starting with one team to enter the Big 12. Gentlemen, you have the floor. Who do you think? Who would be that team?
I think if we're looking at Big 12, Boise State would actually make sense jump into there. Big 12, you don't need to be smart. You don't need to be good. Boise State has the facilities. They got the fan base. They got the history. They just not Pac-12 caliber academically. Big 12, they're definitely. So I think, Boise State would jump right up in there. You can have your regional stuff with your Washington State, Oregon State. Now, realistically, I think if the Big 12 is doing something like this because Washington and Oregon went to the Big 10, I think we got more openings. And I think Washington State and Oregon State are not in the Big 12. I do not think they get an invite. I think the Big 12 goes after more, maybe some ACC teams, maybe UNC and Duke stay together with North Carolina State. I think that makes a lot of sense. I doubt North Carolina and Duke, since it's the biggest game, in their programs, they would ever leave. But I don't think Washington State and Oregon State get this Power 5 invite. I think they drop down to the Mountain West, and that would leave no room for any FBS or FCS teams to come unless we're doing some type of merger.
Ooh, so are we picking one like realistic and then one FCS option? Is that what you want?
Let's nope. I want to work our way down the trail. So give me one.
Deal.
Give me the
I've got
final.
my FCS ready, but
In this
scenario, Boise
this
State.
scenario,
Jeremiah, current athletic director Jeremiah Dickey was just like the associate at Baylor. So if Baylor's still in the Big 12, they're one of the big teams in the Big 12 now. I mean, that just makes sense. Plus the history with UC or Utah and TCU when they were in the Mountain West for a short time there as conference mates. The regionality to Washington State and Oregon State and Colorado and Utah. Like Boise State is the obvious choice, but
Chris and Kylor, I'm gonna let you guys get us all the way through the FBS, and Sam Herder, our great guest, you will get that final FCS pick. So Mountain West here has an opening. Chris and Kylor, who are they going to bring in, and from where?
UC Davis.
You think they'd go FCS right away over some of these other options?
Oh, out of
G5. Yep.
So if you're, I mean,
everything's on the table.
FCS.
Everything's on the table here.
New Mexico State.
Yeah, they would probably go after New Mexico State or UTEP.
Yeah, UTEP is one I keep hearing all
Former
about.
member. Yeah.
Yep. So let's go UTEP. We'll bring them over to the Mountain West. CUSA has an opening. Undoubtedly, nobody remotely wants to leave Sunbelt American Mountain Western MAC for the CUSA, meaning it's probably the bottom tier non-power conference in this scenario, which brings us to the FCS selections. And Mr. Herder, is it just as easy as last time? You have one FCS team you're going to lose, making our FCS team series one team shorter next year until we get a D2 team. What do you think? Who's the one team worthy?
I mean, what this, like, if this all played itself out, because right when this news started, began, it was like, oh, Mountain West is going to lose teams. They're going to add teams. North Dakota State, Montana State, FBS, here we come.
Yeah.
If this scenario shakes out, it's like, nope, Mountain West doesn't take any FCS teams. The one team that's going to move up is going to be the old crapshoot, CUSA, where it's all over the map. Again, I think it'd be Tarleton. I think they would fit into here as well.
Can I throw an interesting one out though? What if it's Jackson State?
Jackson.
They've got Dion.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be crazy?
That could be a grab. They've got the attendance. They've got the fan base. It's not totally wild geography-wise. I mean, obviously they're giving up the HBCU conference history, but, I mean, Dion's made that program ambitious. That's a loud mouth to try to quiet if he starts preaching for it. I'm just saying I could see that as actually kind of a sneaky – I'm not saying realistic, but like a sneaky realistic scenario that I don't think a lot of people would think about.
I still think it's more realistic to get the full SWAC to move up than Jackson State moving up by themselves.
Oh man.
Yeah, I saw that discussion being brought up that the SWAC just needs to with all this realignment, just to say, screw it and move up to the FBS as a whole. I just think that it's a lot easier said than done, obviously, because you have to get funding in place and facilities in place. And also that's never been done before. And so again, how would that happen? Who would have to approve that? I don't think you can, because people have talked about North Dakota State, South Dakota State, Montana schools, Idaho schools, like, moving up, banding together, creating Summit League football conference, then moving up as a whole to the FBS. I don't know how that would work, especially if we still have this huge college football playoff revenue pots. And all of a sudden these eight teams from the FCS say, hey, we want to go to the FBS. Well, what are the FBS commissioners going to say? No.
Can you imagine Mark Emmert if that ever this whole conference wants to go up? He would have a heart attack. He can barely handle exam scams.
I don't know if he would have any say. I think it would come down to FBS commissioners, like to some vote or some bylaw saying like, would we allow this entire conference to become a G5 conference or an FBS conference? They would probably say no, because that's 8 more teams dipping into the college football revenue pot. So
those super conferences are gone. So now you're going to get the Big Sky, Missouri Valley, CA, Ivy League, and SWAC all moving up. With a couple teams in those conferences not being able to.
Man, it's going to lead to a bunch of chaos, guys. Probably more podcasts and things like this to come along. I think things are going to move really quick. What did move fast was all
Whoa.
the fun we had on this podcast. Chris Hammond, breaking news.
Just announced Oregon and Washington have applied to join the Big Sky or the Big Ten. Reported by
Here
I said
it
that earlier.
comes.
Literally just broke.
Man,
So
okay.
we're already out of date.
Yep. Let me pull up the Excel sheets. I'll make a few more spelling errors and learn how to spell
Pac-12 dead.
Florida. We'll go from there.
Wow.
Pac-12. And I thought FCS
Live
playoff
reaction.
expansion.
Pac-12 just died live.
I thought FCS playoff expansion was the hottest topic of this offseason, but no, Power 5 just always has
Yep.
to.
So we're gonna end this show and just reboot now with like, all right, so now the Pac-12's
Yeah.
dead. What
Welcome
now?
back.
Episode 2.
So Excel sheet
Sad day.
number 2 was the winner, right on topic with the Power 2 conference soon to form. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. Sam Herder, thank you so much for taking the time. We know you are like the hardest working man in the FCS. You and Craig Haley, you guys are just great. Thank you so much for you. I'll give you a minute here just if you want to plug your platform. I will link Sam. If you guys are watching on YouTube, just click in the link description below and you will see Sam Herder's link to his podcast and his columns and, of course, his Twitter handle as well. So, Sam, a minute on the floor if you have anything to promote or would just like to say before we roll out of here.
Well, just want to say thanks to you guys for having me on. I always enjoyed, jumping on this podcast and interacting with you guys. So this has been really fun. And, who knows what the future of the FCS is, but hopefully we have, several more trips down to Frisco together. And then hopefully, I love Frisco, but hopefully in 2027, we have a trip for the FCS national title in, a different
Miami.
spot. So
Yeah.
Miami.
Be a nice
Vegas,
change of
baby.
be a nice change of pace, but then we wouldn't have a hypothetical question to answer every offseason. So, all right, guys, thank you so much for listening. If you were listening to this through your radio waves and you're like, I didn't see any Excel sheet, subscribe to our YouTube channel. It is the FCS Fans Nation Network. We have South Dakota State podcast, Eastern Washington podcast, Idaho podcast, ASUN, WAC, and of course our podcast here and many more to come. The subscribers are flowing up there, and it provides you the best opportunity to go to one spot for FCS content. So thank you so much for listening, guys. We really appreciate it. We hope the rest of your summer goes much smoother than conference realignment. Thanks for joining the FCS Fans Nation podcast. Have a good one, guys. Boom.
Thank you for listening to the FCS Fans Nation podcast. Make sure to like and subscribe to this podcast on your preferred listening platform, whether it's Apple, Spotify, Google, or even YouTube. And make sure to follow our FCS Fans Nation social media pages on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you for listening to the premier podcast for FCS football. Boom.